In 1903, William Langley tried and failed to make his aircraft fly. Langley was financed by the US government with $2 million in today's money. Because of such a failure, back then actually trusted newspaper New York Times published an article named "Flying Machines Which Do Not Fly," where they said the following: "It might be assumed that the flying machine, which will really fly, might be evolved by the combined and continuous efforts of mathematicians and mechanicians in from 1 million to 10 million years. Provided, of course, we can meanwhile eliminate such little drawbacks and embarrassments as the existing relation between weight and strength in inorganic materials." Less than 10 weeks later, the Wright brothers managed to fly with their homemade aircraft 4 times on the same day. Aside from this being one of the biggest hold my beer moments in recorded history, this event is also a brilliant teacher for today's topic. 70 years ago, people thought we'd never reach the moon. Today, some people think that we can't establish a permanent home for humanity on Mars. But as the famous saying goes, the only thing that we can learn from history is that we can't learn from history. So let's answer the following questions. What will it take to make Mars a home for humanity? When will we see the first human walk on the red planet? Will it be a private or government-funded achievement? And most importantly of all, when will we see the first human to be born on Mars? We will answer those and a few more questions in reverse order. If any or all of those questions sound extremely intriguing, then make sure to subscribe to Astrozone by clicking the red button and ringing the bell icon right beside it. Now strap your seatbelt, or maybe don't bother, because if you're in a spaceship and say a meteorite hits it, a seatbelt is not going to do much, I'm afraid. The first and most important point we have to discuss is whether this mission, this journey to Mars, is financed entirely by the government, by the private sector, or some combination of the two. Or to explain it in an excruciatingly simple way, the question is if SpaceX and Elon Musk will be involved in the first mission to Mars or not. Depending on how we answer that question, the answer to any other question we might have will change drastically. For the sake of our sanity, we have to go with the best case scenario. That is to say that whatever speculations we make must be as reasonably positive as we can. For instance, the most positive idea would be to wait for aliens to land any second now and give us the means to teleport everything on Mars along with 1 billion or so people. But that's not as reasonable as the following ideas. In the best case scenario, instead of the government funding a smart guy and hoping that it will work, just like in Langley's case, or waiting for Elon to finally make a good enough rocket to reach and come back from Mars, we will assume that this whole endeavor will be a team effort. And as much as we would like Elon to do it himself, he simply can't because most of SpaceX's income comes directly from the US government contracts. This means whatever resources the government is willing to throw at this project, plus a man who really wants to go back to his home, is what we have to work with. This is what the positive outcomes look like. SpaceX is not delayed unreasonably by any current or future involvement from the government, just like it is currently because of Starship's recent explosion. If you like to move, watch our video on that exact topic. The government is interested and willing to give SpaceX, as the most advanced rocket producer company, say a few $1 billion. Considering how many bragging rights you will get if you are first to land an astronaut on Mars, it's easy to imagine how willing any presidential administration would be to approve this kind of funding. Yes, that is indeed just hypothetical, mostly because SpaceX and the US government are already working together on a number of projects. This is a good sign. The bad sign is that NASA is working on its independent Mars mission, while SpaceX is doing its own thing. This symbiotic relationship between the private and public sectors will be crucial when the time comes to establish a permanent base. The joint effort of NASA and SpaceX will undoubtedly be much more effective than anything else. This is our setup. Now, considering the best case scenario, when do you think the first human will land on Mars? Stick around to find out. For any mission which involves humans in space, the first thing we have to guarantee is their safety. The most important aspect of any mission is the flow of information. If we can make sure the exchange of data between Earth and a rocket flying toward the Red Planet, then that would solve half our problems before they even arise. That can be done by sending a few satellites to Mars. And we're not talking about the ones that are already there observing and examining the Red Planet, no. We are talking about the kind of satellites that give us GPS, instant communication, and, of course, the internet. If there is no internet, the first astronauts who land on Mars can't watch TikTok videos, which we simply cannot have. There is another aspect of the mission where SpaceX with its quickly developing Starlink satellites will come in handy. Imagine sending somewhere around 300 Starlink satellites around the Red Planet. The communication problem will be solved. Depending on how much they try, NASA can maybe figure out a trajectory for certain specialized satellites that will fly on the path between Earth and Mars. An army of satellites flying on both planets' orbits and making sure that the communication between the two is secure will give us ease of mind in this department. Yeah, who cares about that? We want to know about Martian babies, I hear you ask. Well, we'll get there when we get there. Be patient. The next and the most pressing matter is, actually taking people to Mars. Being months in space is not going to be easy. Fortunately, we already know how many things we have to deal with thanks to the International Space Station. But moving safely in orbit around Earth is going to be a completely different deal compared to moving through open space to a completely different planet. A wise decision would be to send a decoy mission or two. A rocket going to Mars and back to Earth with astronauts inside, but no landing just yet. Using these test missions, we can gather more data and make sure that a journey through space for that long will not have unforeseen consequences once those astronauts move on to the next phase of the mission. After that, or rather with those decoy missions, we can send tons and tons of important supplies, food, water, and air, for example. Those supplies can be sent to the surface of Mars right away, or they could simply stay floating around the Red Planet until the main rocket arrives and takes those supplies to the surface with them. A great idea would be to send a rocket, much like the ISS, to Mars. A floating base will come in handy for many different reasons. Those above-mentioned decoy missions can also be used to send and replace crew on board. Elon Musk is planning to reach Mars by the end of this decade. If that ambition is aided by the massive resources of the federal government, that time can easily be cut down. But let's say for simplicity's sake that we will see a man walk on the Red Planet in just 5 years. By far the most important thing once humans start walking on the Red Planet will be adaptability. While at first we have no choice but to send millions of kilograms of material, food and water, eventually, if we plan to stay there permanently, we have to start using what we can straight from the new planet. If you have ever seen The Martian, you know exactly what we are talking about. First, the food. Using local Martian soil and tons of natural fertilizer, it is possible to start growing different foods there. It will take some time, but eventually, when the farming techniques get optimized, the food growth on Mars will hopefully be enough to sustain the base. Setting up a base in a perfect strategic location is a must, because if we find a place near or on top of an icy surface, we can send machines to turn that ice straight into our favorite H2O in a liquid form. That machine is named a stove. Jokes aside, a base with ice reserves will be crucial to saving millions of dollars by not sending any more water to Mars. Once those simple yet crucial aspects of life are dealt with and the base becomes self-sustained, at least in those departments, we can start to get a lot more ambitious. By sending the necessary equipment and experienced people, we can eventually start mining operations on the Red Planet. Now, how cool would that be to have a miner on Mars as a profession in your biography? Those people will probably be the ones who will have stories that they can to an astronaut. Even with the tech we have now, all of this is possible within the next 20 years, given that World War III does not break out in that time, or hopefully, anytime soon. Now for the question you would most likely want an answer to. When will we see the first birth of a human child on the surface of the Red Planet? That moment will undoubtedly mark a new chapter in the story of mankind, and, as you would imagine, it is hard to answer. But in all likelihood, whenever the Martian miner becomes a viable profession, it will be soon followed by, or even preceded by, the first human not to be born on our blue planet. So, in our guesstimation, within the next 25 years. We will surely cover that story whenever it happens, so make sure you are subscribed to Astrozone. Otherwise, you can like this video and tell us what will be the worst case scenario where we will still reach the Red Planet. We will meet in the next video, and until then, have a peaceful day.